Thank you everybody for joining us today. We have a special invited speaker today, as usual on Fridays. We have these Friday talks, and he is Haakon Skar. That is the chairman of the board of the Department of Physics at NTNU, and also the CEO of the industry cluster THAMSKLYNGEN. He is also the former CEO of the University Incubator NTNU Axel. And he also serves for more than 10 years in the panel of experts in Research Council of Norway. So he knows NTNU very well, but he also knows industry, knows funding, Research Council. And also what he told me is that he truly is living the NTNU slogan, knowledge for a better world. So then I will let him present you his vision about the capacity for innovation between academia and industry. Haakon, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mara, and thank you everyone for having me in here. I'm honored, and it's a great pleasure to say a few words about innovation and the capacity for innovation in NTNU. I want to start by introducing you to THAMSKLYNGEN and what I do every day, and then I'll give you a couple of examples of where the industry that I represent have collaborated very closely with the academia and the experts at NTNU. And then I'll talk more generally about what innovation and capacity for innovation is and how I see that shifting radically in a month or so within NTNU. So I'm going to comment on some current affairs that's currently taking place. So let's begin by traveling 35 minutes from Trondheim. If you go in the direction of southeast along the E39 highway, in 35 minutes you'll be in Orkland. It's an industry park and cluster with a history that stretches back more than 380 years. When you live in Trondheim, you might not realize, but Trøndelag is still a very large and very important part of the Norwegian industry. And as we can see in this map, the cluster of businesses that I represent is a cluster that stretches across the entire county of Trøndelag, from the islands of Frøya and all the way up to the mountains of Verran. The industry in this area have a very long history of working on innovation, and many of them are internationally leading within their fields. The competitiveness comes from technology, and they represent some of the best industry players within both process industry, within food and agriculture and aquaculture. The cluster consists of 39 companies that have come together to share knowledge and innovate together. And the reason why they've come together is that we find that interdisciplinary research, where you take knowledge from one industry sector and you bring the learnings across to the other, has actually got many benefits that benefit both those who share their knowledge and those who receive it. So when we look at THAMSKLYNGEN, you'll notice that there are many different businesses that are represented. Some of the businesses that are core to the cluster will be the large process industry plants. This represented by Elkem at Thamshavn, a plant that produces silicon and silicon oxides. We've also got large plants within the food processing industry. Here we see salmon and chicken, two products that are heavily dependent on protein feed, which is, again, one of the areas of research of NTNU. We've also got the oil and gas industry, and this is a picture from within one of the factories at Grønnøra in Orkanger. What you see in the middle there, the green, that's a metal pipe that's been covered in a membrane, and the cavity that you see around the green pipe, that's now to be filled with plastics, highly advanced plastics that have both thermal and mechanical properties, allowing this metal pipe to be laid on the seabed and stay there for 100 years to protect it against both the cold water as well as the effects of corrosion. And that's a real-sized person that we see here. So imagine the scale of this thing. The industry in Trøndelag is evolving very rapidly, and the latest factory to be proposed is a mega site for a battery factory. This project is spearheaded by Elinor Batteries. And the reason why they decided to put a factory producing batteries in Orkanger is that geographically, this is the perfect location for industry. The gigasite is a site which is currently undeveloped, and it's possible to develop this area doing everything right in terms of energy and water and recycling of waste materials. It's also just 30 kilometers away from a large pool of workers in Trondheim and 30 kilometers away from the academia of NTNU and SINTEF, which play a pivotal role in the establishment of the factory of Elinor Batteries. It's also got Trøndelag's biggest container port. It's a great place to connect to the electrical grid because we've got 2 connection points to the national electric grid, located just a few kilometers away from this site. But there's a reason why THAMSKLYNGEN was formed that I didn't talk about initially. And the reason why they formed the cluster is that merely 8 years ago, the United Nations introduced the Sustainable Development Goals. And this was the key motivator for why companies came together, because we're now trying to solve some of the biggest environmentally and social problems of the world. And specifically, the member companies of THAMSKLYNGEN wanted to unite around the green transition of energy and materials towards a circular economy. They started out by mapping all of their available energy, water, and waste products and created this map to just illustrate where they were. THAMSKLYNGEN's members took this a bit further. They analyzed the data that they found here, and they created this map of the future. This is a roadmap that shows current, existing, and future businesses that need to be located within a kilometer of each other in the site of Orkanger, connecting the flows of energy, water, and waste materials to be used as raw materials for other businesses. And it's currently named as one of the 3 leading circular economy parks in Norway. This was only possible because they took a systematic approach to how they're going to move their industry from being linear to circular and to move from fossil to green energy. They want to be carbon negative by 2035. And they've been fostering the flow of capital to fund all of the investments needed to reconfigure and add cleaning facilities to all of their factories. This has created a blueprint for the Norwegian government, and the Norwegian government has taken many of the learnings from Orkanger and included them in this national strategy for how to turn the industry of Norway into a green industry. This roadmap that the government has now released in their 2nd version contains 150 initiatives that businesses in Norway need to carry out. And this book creates a great starting point for a conversation between industry and academia, because it creates the correct level of abstraction between what a business might need to do and what academia can do for a whole industry. And the THAMSKLYNGEN, the cluster, works to bring together the people from companies, the government who create the laws and set the taxes and the subsidies, the universities that educate talent and bring forward our knowledge and research, capital, and the individuals who make things happen that we call entrepreneurs. If we take a look at what this has created in Orkanger specifically, I mentioned earlier that within about a kilometer of each other, there are many businesses located, and two of them are Wacker and Elkem silicon plants. What they produce is raw materials that go into the material industry around the world. And as part of that, they collect a dust from their filters, from their furnace, that they've currently deposited into nature. This nature deposit has to stop by the end of 2027 because they can no longer deposit this mineral in nature. So they need to find a better use for that mineral. And through an extensive period of research that included NTNU and SINTEF, they found a way to turn that powder into a brick using knowledge from adjacent industries. This brick can now be used as a raw material back into the process. So we are recycling the waste product to be used as a raw material back in the same factory. The setup looks like this. And as you remember, this is now part of the actual plan for how to build the industry. And that factory in the middle here, that's a brand new factory that NTNU and SINTEF helped to develop. Jumping very quickly to another field of interest, we collect a lot of garbage from households and industry that are being collected by Remit and Trondheim Renholdsverk. And part of that garbage is plastics. The problem with plastics is that some of them can be recycled and others can't. And when you collect plastic, you don't really tell the industry or the business or the people at home to separate their plastics into different bins. But that has to happen at the recycling plant. Fortunately, it's very easy to separate different plastic types using a very simple sensor, which uses near infrared light. The operation takes mere fractions of a second. And the sensor and the technology behind it, that's developed by universities. This sensor technology is now commercialized by a company, but the core technology behind it is developed by academia, knowing that there is a need for this type of sensors. And as you can see, it's super small and it's cheap to build. So this now creates the foundation for sorting plants that will separate plastics into different bins around the world. So I think it's then worth to start to talk about the topic of today, the value of the capacity for innovation within universities. And I think it's worth starting by taking a step back and just reminding ourselves what are the three pillars of academia. And as you know, academia is responsible for educating new talents. We take in students and they graduate as bachelors and masters of technology or within their fields of expertise. The second pillar of universities is to do basic research and applied research. We produce a lot of knowledge and we measure our ability to do so primarily through how many publications we produce. And the third pillar, as some of you will be very well familiar with, the innovation pillar is one that we don't necessarily count as accurately, but we have a pro headmaster of innovation called Toril Hernes, who's promoting innovation within academia as the third pillar of our activities. If you read university newspaper 3 days ago, you might have noticed the article about the upcoming board meeting of NTNU on the 12th of June. The most important thing that will happen in that board meeting is that NTNU will get a new headmaster. But I think it's more important that they will decide in that board meeting whether to change the pillar from innovation to dissemination and social awareness. This fundamentally changes what NTNU will measure and what we want the NTNU staff to focus on. So let's take a look at this dissemination and what it is. Dissemination can be so many different things. Typically, we think about it as, on one hand, giving lectures to the public on our field of expertise. We have research centers where we invite industry to come in, and through the joint research, businesses take away new knowledge that they bring back to their business, and this is also dissemination of knowledge. And professors and teachers at NTNU should continue to write textbooks on their field of expertise, promoting their knowledge through them. We can expand this list and see there are so many different ways that dissemination can take place. Textbooks, that's one way. Public lectures, public webinars, attending conferences where we present our knowledge and our research results. Shifting to the right, patents and licenses have been classic ways that we share knowledge measured as innovation in industry, and methods that on how to do things, like the process knowledge of both process industry and food processing. Those are methods that are difficult to articulate as a patent or a license, but definitely part of the know-how that industry rely on, which is generated by universities. We can share knowledge through digital libraries, and we can also take part in the public discourse through traditional media or social media. If we look at a couple of examples from recent history where NTNU has participated in the dissemination of knowledge and social responsibility, there are a few people who stand out, specifically Inga Strumke and our two friends from the Department of Physics who have been promoting the use of nuclear power within the power grid of Norway. As you may very well know, these two guys, they presented their findings and they objected to industry lobbyists saying that it's important that we take into account the realities of these industries and don't look historically at how older plants have a higher cost of producing energy. I think we can all agree that all three of them have definitely made a mark for themselves and for NTNU within the world that we live in Norway specifically, and they've definitely helped promote the public image of NTNU as a source of important information that we need to listen to. So if you look at academia and industry partnerships, I think these serve as good role models for a different way of thinking of innovation, which is going beyond just creating patents and licenses. And I must say, I welcome this new focus on social responsibility and dissemination, and I applaud NTNU's proposal to remove the position of headmaster of innovation and replace it with a headmaster of social responsibility and dissemination. Innovation will still be part of that. It'll just be one component of many different ways of connecting NTNU with industry. If we then go back to what I would recommend that we use to measure academic industry partnerships, I've made this list that I've shared with a working group within the department that acts as an inspiration for how we can continue to work with dissemination of and innovation in industry. If we look at the we want to count how many collaborations we initiate between academia and industry. The number of connection points is basically what it's all about. And it's important that academia and industry both initiate that collaboration through those connection points between a business and a professor. We also want to measure how much we engage with policymakers, because let's face it, the industry and the world that we live in depend on policies that are created by politicians. And we can definitely influence with knowledge what policies are being implemented. If we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, we in academia can definitely promote the understanding of methods and ways to measure the impact of the industry we have today, and we can help to guide the industry in a direction where they can meet the Sustainable Development Goals. We can encourage interdisciplinary research, we can support entrepreneurship and startups, and we can promote social innovation. These are all roles that we naturally take on through our interaction with both students and industry leaders and industry partners that we meet. We must continue to leverage the technology transfer offices. We're not going to change our practices in the technology transfer office. And we must continue to invest in entrepreneurship education, but focus also equally much on creating public awareness and engagement. I think, Mara, that ends my talk. We have a few innovation pitfalls that we can mention, but I think we'll end it there.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Haakon, for your presentation. And thank you for the view over the industry to academia, and also the view over the next steps that the universities in NTNU, in Norway can take, and NTNU could take from next steps into sharing the knowledge to the world in different forms, not only patents and licenses, but also disseminate, communicate, and engage with people. So I think that that's very important. So we'll open the floor now for the people in the community, in the public, if they want to have some questions.